Hello and welcome to another CompTIA Security Plus practice exam video, where in this video I'm going to go over 30 practice exam questions while pointing out keywords and phrases for each one. And throughout this video, I'm going to answer each question exactly how I teach them to students, which is by first figuring out the keywords and phrases in each question and then using the process of elimination to get the best answer. There is going to be a total of 30 questions, 6 from each of the 5 different domains that you'll come across on the exam. And I want to mention that these are not from the actual CompTIA exam, but they're questions formatted in a very similar way to what you'll see on the exam. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Question 1. A security team discovers that employees are frequently plugging unauthorized USB drives into workstations. Which of the following is the best operational control to reduce this behavior? A. Implementing full disk encryption. B. Requiring USB device whitelisting via endpoint security. C. Training users on acceptable use policies. D. Deploying DLP software. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the key phrases here. Just like every question, we're going to start off by going through the key phrases for the question and then doing the process of elimination. So without a doubt, the best key phrase here is going to be best operational control. And this alone gives us the answer. But let's go ahead and do the process of elimination now. We can start by eliminating A, implementing full disk encryption. FDE is a technical control, so it's not an operational control. Next, we can eliminate B, requiring USB device whitelisting via endpoint security. And while this is effective, it is also a technical control. And finally, we can eliminate D, deploying DLP software, which DLP stands for data loss prevention. And DLP is also another technical control. Which leaves us with the answer, which is C, training users on acceptable use policies. This is an operational control because it's policy driven. And the key to this question is to find the answer that has to do with some sort of human behavior, such as following a policy. So the answer for this question is C. Question 2. A security audit reveals that multiple employees are using unapproved file sharing services to collaborate on projects, bypassing the company's official cloud platform. Which of the following does this behavior most likely represent? A. Shadow IT. B. Insider threat. C. Hacktivist activity. Or D. Nation-state interference. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the key phrases for this one. The first is going to be using unapproved file sharing services. And the second one is going to be bypassing the company's official platform. All right, so let's go ahead and do the process of elimination now that we have the key phrases. And we can, right off the bat, start by eliminating D, nation-state interference. And these are external, highly skilled people who often target government or critical infrastructure. There's no external or geopolitical aspect here. Next, we can eliminate C, hacktivist activity. And these are groups of people driven by political or social agendas. And they also target organizations as a form of protest or activism. And finally, we can eliminate B, insider threats. And this involves malicious or compromised employees who intentionally or unintentionally cause harm. There's no indication that anything malicious is happening, though. And that leaves us with the answer, which is A, shadow IT. And shadow IT involves employees or departments using their own tools, like cloud apps or services, without involving IT or security. And this does happen all the time. But the answer for this one is A, shadow IT. Question 3. A company wants to separate its finance, HR, and engineering departments in the network to limit access between them while still using the same physical infrastructure. Which of the following is the best approach to meet this requirement? A. Implement an air-gapped network for each department. B. Deploy serverless computing to reduce cross-access risk. C. Use logical segmentation to isolate department traffic. Or D. Move each department to a separate cloud provider. All right, so the key phrases here, I would say there are two, and the first one's going to be limit access. And the second is, and pretty important, same physical infrastructure. So now let's go ahead and do the process of elimination here. We can start by eliminating D, moving each department to a separate cloud provider. This, technically wouldn't separate the departments, even though they are on different cloud providers. Next, we can eliminate B, deploy serverless computing to reduce cross-access risk. And serverless computing, it's great for scaling, but it doesn't separate departments. And finally, we can eliminate A, implement an air-gapped network for each department. This means physically separated, but the scenario specifically mentions using the same physical infrastructure. And that leaves us with the answer, which is C, use logical segmentation to isolate department traffic. And this would involve configuring things such as like VLANs or virtual networks on the same hardware. Question 4. A security analyst is performing a risk assessment on a factory floor and identifies several embedded systems running proprietary firmware with minimal OS functionality. Which of the following would be least likely to improve the security posture of these devices? A. Network segmentation. B. Firmware integrity checking. C. EDR. Or D. Access control restrictions. All right. So the key phrases for this one is going to be embedded systems and least likely to improve the security. So let's go ahead and do the process elimination. And we can start by first eliminating A, network segmentation. Network segmentation is very effective for things like embedded systems. Next, we can eliminate B, firmware integrity checking. And this is a solid security control. It ensures, the firmware hasn't been tampered with or replaced with malicious code, which is a major concern for embedded systems. And finally, we can eliminate D, access control restrictions, and limiting who and what can communicate with or manage the embedded systems. That is a fundamental best practice. And that leaves us with C, EDR, which EDR stands for endpoint detection and response. And EDR solutions typically require things called agents to be installed on devices, and they depend on OS level hooks, which embedded systems don't often support due to things like limited resources or proprietary operating systems. So that would be the least likely to improve the security posture of these devices. C, EDR. Question 5. A company wants to ensure that security is incorporated from the beginning of software development and continues through maintenance and eventual decommissioning. Which of the following governance elements would best support this objective? A, AUP. B, SDLC. C, change management policy. Or D, DRP. All right, so for the key phrases for this one, I would say that there's one, and that's going to be security is incorporated from the beginning of software development. So let's go and do the process elimination, and we can start by eliminating D, DRP, which DRP stands for Disaster Recovery Plan, and this focuses on restoring things like services after a major outage or something like an incident. Next, we can eliminate AUP. AUP, that stands for Acceptable Use Policy. And AUP, it defines how users are allowed to use company systems or data, but it has nothing to do with software development or integrating security into that process. And finally, we can eliminate C, change management policy. While change management helps control system and configuration updates, it's more broader and not specific to development or ongoing software security integration, which that leaves us with the answer, which is B, SDLC. And SDLC, that stands for Software Development Lifecycle, very common term in IT. And the SDLC is a more formalized process for software creation that includes security at each phase. And the phases, don't quote me on it, but it's planning, design, development, testing, deployment, and maintenance. I believe that's what it is. Yes. But B, SDLC, is the answer for question 5. Question 6. An organization is implementing zero trust principles to limit the potential impact of compromised accounts. Which of the following is the best example of threat scope reduction within the control plane? A, using an identity provider to authenticate users. B, enforcing multi-factor authentication for remote access. C, segmenting access so users can only reach resources required for their role. Or D, deploying a centralized policy administrator to manage access control. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the key phrases. The first one is going to be limit the potential impact. And the second one is going to be control plane. And I just want to say limit the potential impact is pretty important. That is also referred to as limiting the damage of a threat that a threat could cause. So let's go ahead now that we have the key phrases and do the process of elimination. And right off the bat, we can start with eliminating A, using an identity provider to authenticate users. And this verifies who users are, but it doesn't restrict what they can do once they're inside. Next, we can eliminate B, enforcing multi-factor authentication for remote access. And MFA focuses on preventing unauthorized access, but not limiting what happens after access is granted. And finally, we can eliminate D, deploying a centralized policy administrator to manage access control. And this refers to the policy administrator component in zero trust architecture, but it doesn't itself reduce threat scope. And that leaves us with the answer, which is C, segmenting access so users can only reach resources required for their role. This is the textbook definition of threat scope reduction by limiting lateral movement and minimizing access. Question 7. After opening a .jpg in a third-party photo app, a user system initiates outbound connections to an unknown IP. The image exploited a flaw in the viewer's rendering engine. Which of the following best describes the initial attack vector? A, file-based. B, image-based. C, message-based. Or D, removable device. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the key phrases. The first one is .jpg, which is JPEG. And the second is initial attack vector. I would say this is a pretty easy question, but it does make you think a little bit. So let's go ahead and do the process elimination now that we have the key phrases. And we can immediately start eliminating D, removable device. There is no indication that the attack vector came from a USB or external drive. Next, we can eliminate C, message-based. Same reason for the last answer. There's no indication that the attack vector was from a message. And finally, we can eliminate A, file-based. Now, you could argue that an image is a file, but this is too broad of an answer. Also, not all files are images. And that leaves us with the answer, which is B, image-based. And in this scenario, it was likely that, the exploit was embedded, in something like an image and then triggered by rendering. Question 8. A power outage causes a building's badge access control system to go offline. During the outage, doors remain unlocked to allow safe evacuation and emergency access. Which of the following best describes this failure mode? A, failure open. B, device attribute mismatch. C, security zone configuration. Or D, fail closed. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the key phrases here. Key phrase, I would say there's a single one, and it's pretty important, and that is doors remain unlocked. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination now, and we can start off by eliminating C, security zone configuration. A security misconfiguration. This happens when devices or traffic, they're improperly segmented or isolated. Next, we can eliminate B, device attribute mismatch. And the scenario isn't about configuration mismatches. I want to make that clear. It's more based on behavior during failure. And finally, we can eliminate D, fail closed. And fail closed means that the system denies access during a failure to maintain security. But this scenario specifically states doors unlocked, which is actually the opposite behavior. And that leaves us with the answer, which is A, fail open. Fail open system allows access when a device or system fails or loses something like power. And this is common in, life safety systems where access must remain possible in case of something like an emergency. Question 9. An organization recently completed a hardware refresh and now wants to ensure all systems are accounted for and regularly validated against essential inventory. Which of the following actions would best support this objective? A, assigning asset tags to each new device during procurement. B, performing regular enumeration of devices across the network. C, requiring users to acknowledge ownership of assigned hardware. Or D, classifying each device by its data sensitivity level. All right, so let's take a look at the key phrase here. There are technically a couple of them, but I would say that the most important one is regularly validated against a central inventory. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. And we can start by eliminating D, classifying each device by its data sensitivity level. So this is a classification step, valuable for something like data handling and risk assessment, but it is unrelated to tracking device presence and, validating inventory. Next, we can eliminate A, assigning asset tags to each new device during procurement. This is very useful, and it's done during the acquisition phase, but it doesn't help with the ongoing validation or spotting rogue or unmanaged devices after deployment. And finally, we can eliminate C, requiring users to acknowledge ownership of assigned hardware. This is part of the assignment or accounting process, but it does not enable ongoing validation. And that leaves us with the answer, which is B, performing regular enumeration of devices across the network. Enumeration, actively identifies all connected devices, including unauthorized or forgotten ones, and also can be done on a regular basis. Question 10. A risk manager is tasked with evaluating the potential financial impact of a data breach by calculating expected loss using specific values such as asset value, exposure factor, and annual rate of occurrence. Which of the following risk analysis methods is the manager most likely using? A, qualitative, B, ad hoc assessment, C, continuous assessment, or D, quantitative. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the key phrases here. The first one's going to be calculated expected loss, and the second one is specific values. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. The first one we'll eliminate is going to be B, ad hoc assessment. And this is an informal, as-needed assessment, but it often lacks things like structure or consistency. Next, we can eliminate C, continuous assessment. And this refers to assessments done on an ongoing basis, which can include various methods. But again, this term describes frequency, not a type of risk analysis. And finally, we can eliminate A, qualitative. And this method uses subjective ratings, such as things like high, medium, low, and does not involve, specific calculations or numeric values. And that leaves us with the answer, which is D, quantitative. Quantitative risk analysis involves numeric calculations to estimate risk, including metrics like, SLE, which is single loss expectancy, annual rate of occurrence, and things like annualized loss expectancy. And real quick, if you like these styles of questions and you're looking to take your practice exam studying further, I do have a practice exam course for the Security Plus exam on Udemy that is live right now. This practice course consists of 3 different exams with 90 questions each, making it a total of 270 questions that cover all 5 of the domains, and they are designed to be harder than these questions you see in this video. I run sales as often as Udemy lets me, so make sure to check the description and pinned comment on this video for a coupon code if there is one currently available. And no worries, if you don't want to pay for those questions, I'll still continue to post videos for free right here on YouTube when I can. But anyway, let's go ahead and get back to the exam. Question 11. A system administrator needs to apply a patch to a critical application. During the change management meeting, the team asks what the plan is if the update fails and causes downtime. Which of the following is the most important element to address this concern? A, stakeholder notification. B, backup plan. C, test results. Or D, maintenance window. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the key phrases here. The first one is going to be change management meeting. And the second one is going to be if the update fails and causes downtime. So, a little bit of a spoiler. It's important to know what the question is asking, and it's asking how to recover from a failed change. All right, so now that we have the key phrases for the question, let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. We can start by eliminating A, stakeholder notification. This is important for communication and approval, but doesn't solve the issue of how to recover from a failed change. Next, we can rule out D, maintenance window. And this defines when a change is allowed to occur to minimize impacts, but not how to recover from failure. And finally, we can eliminate C, test results. And this helps show whether a change is likely to succeed, but doesn't help after a failure has occurred. And that leaves us with the answer, which is B, backout plan. And a backout plan is a documented procedure to reverse or undo a change if it fails. Question 12. A developer writes a program that checks a file's permissions before opening it. An attacker exploits a time gap between the check and when the file is accessed, swapping the file with a malicious one in the meantime. Which of the following vulnerabilities is being exploited? A, memory injection, B, TOU, C, buffer overflow, or D, improper input validation? All right, I would say for this question, the single most important phrase to get this question correct is going to be time gap between the check and when the file is accessed. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination, and we can start by eliminating A, memory injection. This scenario doesn't involve injecting code or something like memory manipulation. Next, we can eliminate C, buffer overflow. For this one, there is no indication of oversized input or memory boundary violation. So that leaves us with B, TOU, and D, improper input validation. With that said, we can eliminate D, improper input validation. It's important to know that this question isn't about user input. It's about the timing of file access. So that gives us the answer, which is B, TOU. TOU stands for time of use. And TOU occurs when there's a gap between a check and the use of a resource, and the attacker would exploit that exact window of time. Question 13. An organization shares internal training documents with all employees but restricts external access. The content does not include personal or proprietary data. Which of the following classifications is the most appropriate for this type of information? A, confidential, B, sensitive, C, critical, or D, public? All right, so let's take a look at the key phrase here. Well, I would say there are two that are important. The first one being shares internal training documents. And the second one is going to be does not include personal or proprietary data. So let's go ahead and move to the process of elimination here. And we can start by eliminating C, critical. And critical, that refers to data that is essential for things like operations, where loss could cause major disruption or harm to the organization. Next, we can eliminate D, public. Since external access is restricted, this label is just too permissive. And finally, we can rule out and eliminate A, confidential. Confidential data typically includes proprietary, regulated, or something like personal data. And this leaves us with the answer, which is B, sensitive. And sensitive is a mid-level classification, often used for internal-only use data. It's not for public use, but doesn't require high-level protection like confidential or restricted information would. Question 14. An organization wants to leverage external cybersecurity researchers to discover vulnerabilities in its public-facing web application. Which of the following would be the best approach to encourage responsible disclosure while minimizing risk? A, subscribe to multiple proprietary threat feeds. B, conduct regular internal system audits. C, launch a bug bounty program with clear scope and rules. Or D, perform weekly automated vulnerability scans. All right, I would say the key phrase here is wants to leverage external cybersecurity researchers to discover vulnerabilities. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. We can start by eliminating A, subscribe to multiple proprietary threat feeds. Threat feeds are great for situational awareness and keeping up with known threats, but they don't involve active testing by outside researchers. Next, we can eliminate D, perform weekly automated vulnerability scans. Scans are a part of vulnerability identification, but they're automated and internal. They're not external. And finally, we can eliminate B, conduct regular internal system audits. Internal audits are useful for catching misconfigurations or compliance issues, but they're done internally. And that leaves us with the answer, which is C. Launch a bug bounty program with clear scope and rules. A bug bounty program is a form of responsible disclosure that invites vetted security researchers to test systems like a web app for things like vulnerabilities. Question 15, halfway there. While evaluating third-party vendors, a procurement officer notices that one of the candidates has a personal relationship with a senior decision maker. Which of the following concerns should be reviewed first to maintain integrity in the vendor selection process? A, evidence of internal controls. B, conflict of interest. C, due diligence procedures. Or D, vendor transparency policy. All right, let's take a look at the key phrase that is very important you don't miss, and that's has a personal relationship with the senior decision maker. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. And we can start by eliminating A, evidence of internal controls. And internal controls are important to evaluate our vendor's risk posture, but this comes after verifying the vendor's eligibility and fairness in the selection process. Next, we can eliminate D, vendor transparency policy. A vendor's policy on transparency may be relevant later in the evaluation process, but does not resolve internal ethical risks stemming from your own company selection process. And finally, we can eliminate C, due diligence procedures. And due diligence involves checking the vendor's history, capabilities, and compliance. It's important, but it assumes that the selection is already ethically sound, which is not the case here. And that leaves us with the answer, which is B, conflict of interest. This is a textbook case of a conflict of interest. Personal relationships causing, a risk because of a bias or unfair decision making. And this happens a lot more than you would think. Decision makers having a personal interest in the decisions. Question 16. A company wants to encrypt emails so that only intended recipients can read the message and the sender can digitally sign the message to prove it came from them. Which of the following is the best cryptographic approach to meet both goals? A, symmetric encryption. B, FDE. C, asymmetric encryption. Or D, implement TPM. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the key phrases for the question here. The first key phrase is going to be encrypt emails, and the second is going to be digitally sign the message. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination now. We can start by first eliminating B, FDE, also known as full disk encryption. And FDE protects data at rest, such as data on a computer hard drive, but it does not encrypt email communications. Next, we can eliminate D, implement TPM, which TPM, that stands for Trusted Platform Module. And a TPM is a hardware security chip used to store cryptographic keys securely for things like BitLocker, as an example. But it's used for device security, not email encryption or signing. And that leaves us with either A, symmetric encryption, or C, asymmetric encryption. With that said, we can eliminate A, symmetric encryption. It's important to understand that symmetric encryption does not support digital signatures. And that leaves us with the answer, which is C, asymmetric encryption. This is a method where the sender encrypts with the recipient's public key and the sender signs with their private key. Question 17. An employee reports their company-issued laptop runs slowly and frequently displays pop-ups from unfamiliar trial software. Resource usage remains high, even with no applications open. Which of the following is the most likely cause of this behavior? A, the system is running pre-installed bloatware that consumes resources. B, a Trojan has disguised itself as legitimate software and exfiltrating data. C, ransomware has encrypted the device and is demanding payment to unlock files. Or D, a keylogger is silently monitoring the user's input in the background. All right, for this one, there are two key phrases. I would say the first one is run slowly, and the second one is pop-ups from unfamiliar trial software. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. We can start by eliminating C, ransomware encryption. Now, ransomware causes file access issues and also shows a ransom message. And there is no mention of file encryption or anything like a lockout. Next, we can eliminate D, keylogger, silently monitoring the user's input. Keyloggers are hidden to users and would not display a pop-up for a trial. So it leaves us with A, pre-installed bloatware, or B, Trojan. Now, technically, both of these answers could be correct. However, something that I added that I want to point out is pop-up from unfamiliar trial software. And this is key here. Now, with that said, we can eliminate A, pre-installed bloatware. Bloatware is, pre-installed and usually known software. You could argue that it was a new employee in the bloatware that was installed was unknown to them, and so they started getting pop-ups. But this is not the level of thinking that CompTIA would expect you to have. And with that said, that leaves us with the answer, which is B, a Trojan. And a Trojan has disguised itself as a legitimate software and exfiltrating data. It is very common for Trojans to bundle other malicious programs, and sometimes including a program regarding a free trial, which is trying to get the user to input payment for financial gain. Question 18. After a natural disaster disrupts on-premises operations, a company successfully continues its essential business functions by shifting to a pre-planned alternate site and backup systems. Which of the following security concepts is this an example of? A, load balancing for high availability. B, geographic dispersion for fault tolerance. C, platform diversity for infrastructure resilience. Or D, continuity of operations to ensure business functionality. All right, for this question, the best key phrase is going to be continue its essential business functions. Now let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. And we can start by eliminating A, load balancing for high availability. And load balancing helps distribute traffic between systems to ensure uptime, but this happens during normal operations, not during a disaster. Next, we can eliminate C, platform diversity for infrastructure resilience. And platform diversity involves using different hardware or software vendors to reduce systemic risk, which wouldn't make sense here. And finally, we can eliminate B, geographic dispersion for fault tolerance. Now, geographic dispersion spreads services across multiple regions to reduce impact from local outages. Now, while this is very important and relevant, it's a supporting strategy, not the concept of maintaining business operations. There's a better answer, and that is D, continuity of operations to ensure business functionality. And this is all about maintaining mission critical functions during and after disruption, and using alternate sites and backups after a disaster is pretty much a textbook example. Question 19. A security team is struggling to efficiently analyze logs collected from servers, applications, and network devices due to data being scattered across multiple sources. Which of the following actions would best help centralize and streamline their monitoring efforts? A, configure automatic vulnerability scans across all systems. B, implement log aggregation to collect logs in a unified location. C, schedule recurring audit reports for executive leadership. Or D, set up alert thresholds for CPU and memory usage. All right, let's take a look at the key phrase here. There are multiple, but the most important would be centralize and streamline. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination here. We can start by eliminating A, configure automatic vulnerability scans across all systems. Now, while this is helpful for identifying known vulnerabilities, this doesn't solve the problem of scattered logs or help with log analysis or central monitoring. Next, we can eliminate D, set up alert thresholds for CPU and memory usage. This helps monitor performance, not security logs. And now we can eliminate C, schedule recurring audit reports for executive leadership. Now, this provides visibility kind of at a high level. It's reporting, it's not log consolidation. And that leaves us with the answer, which is B, implement log aggregation to collect logs in a unified location. This is the process of collecting logs from multiple systems and consolidating them into one location, often through a SIM or log management tool. And that makes it a lot easier to monitor, search, analyze, and alert on security events across the environment. Question 20. A healthcare organization failed to meet a regulatory requirement regarding the handling of patient data. As a result, the governing body revoked its legal ability to operate under its current certification. Which of the following best describes the consequence the organization experienced? A, reputation damage. B, contractual impact. C, loss of license. Or D, financial sanction. All right, for this one, the key phrase is going to be revoked its legal ability to operate. All right, so process of elimination for this question is going to start off by eliminating D, financial sanction. Fines are, often accompany compliance violations, but the question doesn't mention a monetary penalty. Next, we can eliminate A, reputation damage. Now, likely to happen in this scenario, it's a secondary effect. The question specifically states that the organization lost the ability to legally operate, which goes beyond just image or reputation. And finally, we can eliminate B, contractual impact. This could occur if the organization failed to meet obligations with, things like business partners, but the regulatory loss of legal authority is not primarily a contractual issue. And that leaves us with C, loss of license. Now, losing a license or something like a certification due to non-compliance means the organization can no longer legally perform certain services, such as, it's relevant in industries like healthcare, but could also be other industries like finance, as an example. Could be many different industries. Question 21. A security team is evaluating ways to prevent unauthorized individuals from entering the server room. Which of the following would be the best example of a physical security control? A, security awareness training for all employees. B, implementing biometric authentication for user logins. C, installing a badge reader on the server room door. Or D, reviewing access logs on a weekly basis. All right. If you read what the question is asking, this is actually a pretty easy question. But with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at the key phrases. The first key phrase is going to be entering the server room. And the second is going to be best example of a physical security control. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. And we can start by eliminating A, security awareness training for all employees. This is a operation control and not a direct physical barrier. Next, we can eliminate D, reviewing access logs on a weekly basis. This is used for auditing and oversight. It helps detect problems after they occur, but doesn't actively stop someone from entering. And finally, we can eliminate B, implementing biometric authentication for user logins. This is a technical control, and it is used for digital access to systems, not physical doors. And that leaves us with the answer, which is C, installing a badge reader on the server room door. This is a physical control, like the key phrase is requiring, and it is part of controlling physical space access. Question 22. A security analyst is responding to a malware outbreak affecting several endpoints. To prevent the malware from spreading while keeping the devices available for forensic analysis, which of the following is the best mitigation technique to apply next? A. Enforce strict access control lists on internal routers. B. Isolate the infected systems from the network. C. Encrypt the compromised systems to protect sensitive data. Or D. Apply missing patches to all affected endpoints. All right, let's take a look at the key phrases here. The first one is going to be prevent the malware from spreading. And the second one is best mitigation technique. So let's go ahead and go through the process of elimination now. We can first start by eliminating D. Apply missing patches to all affected endpoints. This is helpful, but patching during an incident could cause bigger issues and also disrupt the investigation as a whole. Next, we can eliminate C, encrypting compromised systems to protect sensitive data. And the attacker may already have access, so this one gets ruled out. And finally, we can eliminate A, enforce strict access control lists on internal routers. ACLs are great for controlling traffic, but the answer is not effective enough during an active investigation. And that leaves us with the answer, which is B, isolate the infected systems from the network. This answer immediately stops communication with other systems and leaves the devices intact for analysis, which is very important for forensics and investigations. Question 23. A security analyst notices that multiple virtual machines hosted on the same physical server are experiencing performance degradation and intermittent network drops. Which of the following should the analyst check first to troubleshoot the issue? A, resource usage and configuration of the virtualization host. B, whether the network is using SDN. C, physical oscillation between VLANs and subnets. Or D, the centralized versus decentralized control model for routing decisions. All right, let's take a look at the key phrases here. The first one is multiple virtual machines hosted, and the second one is degradation and intermittent network drops. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination now. We can start by first eliminating B, whether the network is using SDN, and SDN stands for software-defined network. This is useful for things like network management, but it's not the first place to look when all VMs on a single host are affected. Next, we can eliminate C, physical oscillation between VLANs and subnets. And VLANs and subnets handle network segmentation, not virtualized specific performance. And finally, we can eliminate D, the centralized versus decentralized control model for routing decisions. This is more about network architecture strategy, and it doesn't explain localized issues on a single host affecting only its VMs. And that leaves us with the answer, which is A, resource usage and configuration of the virtualization host. Performance and connectivity issues across all VMs on the same host typically point to something like resource exhaustion or misconfigured virtual network interfaces. Question 24. A company is concerned about inconsistent web filtering across remote and on-site employees. To enhance control and apply uniform security policies regardless of user location, which of the following would be the best solution? A, tune IDS signatures for known browser-based threats. B, deploy URL scanning on endpoint browsers. C, implement a centralized proxy for all outbound web traffic. Or D, block all web traffic on non-standard ports on the firewall. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the key phrases here. I would say there's two. The first is inconsistent web filtering, and the second is apply uniform security policies. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination now. We can first eliminate A, tune IDS signatures for known browser-based threats. IDS, which is intrusion detection system, tuning doesn't enforce web filtering or address inconsistent policy enforcement across different locations. Next, we can eliminate B, deploy URL scanning on endpoint browsers. This helps detect malicious URLs locally, but it is agent-based and hard to manage uniformly, especially with something like a remote user. And finally, we can eliminate D, block all web traffic on non-standard ports on the firewall. This can limit unwanted connections, but doesn't provide content filtering or something like URL control. And that leaves us with the answer, which is C, implement a centralized proxy for all outbound web traffic. And a centralized proxy forces all web traffic, from remote or on-site users through a single controlled points where something like uniform filtering, logging, scanning, and content control policies can then be applied. Question 25. An organization wants to ensure that its internal audit function remains objective and that findings are properly escalated to executive leadership. Which of the following is the best positioned to oversee this function and maintain accountability? A, compliance department, B, internal audit team, C, risk management group, or D, audit committee. All right. The key phrase for this one is internal audit function remains objective. So let's go into the process of elimination now. We can start by eliminating C, risk management group. These groups don't hold governance power to enforce accountability or escalate findings at the executive level. Next, we can eliminate B, internal audit team. These teams, they perform the audit but cannot oversee themselves and creates a conflict of interest and undermines objectivity. And finally, we can eliminate A, compliance department. The compliance team ensures adherence to laws and regulations, but they're often the subject of audits themselves and should not oversee audit independence. And that leaves us with the answer, which is D, the audit committee. And the audit committee is typically a subcommittee of something like the board of directors. It ensures objectivity, independence, and proper reporting channels for internal audits. Question 26. A network architect notices that several systems on the same subnet are allowed to communicate without any inspection simply because they're part of the internal network. What is the most likely security issue that needs to be addressed? A, lack of centralized authentication. B, use of implicit trust zones. C, policy enforcement point misconfigurations. Or D, incorrect subject identity mapping. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the key phrases here. The first one's going to be same subnet, and the second is going to be allowed to communicate without inspection. And this is key because it indicates that access control or filtering is missing. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination now. And we can start off by eliminating A, lack of centralized authentication. This is all about managing who can access the network systems, which is important, but this issue is about traffic being trusted just because of network location, not user or device identity. Next, we can eliminate D, incorrect subject identity mapping. And identity mapping is about correlating users or systems to their access rights. This is incorrect because of the same reason for the last possible answer. And finally, we can eliminate C, policy enforcement point misconfigurations. This would apply if policies were not being enforced properly due to misconfiguration, but the issue here isn't about incorrect enforcement, it's about not enforcing policies at all. And that leaves us with the answer, which is B, use of implicit trust zones. These trust zones assume that devices in the same network area can trust each other, and that is exactly what's happening here. No inspection is happening because of where the devices are, not who or what they are. Question 27. During a security test, a consultant enters specially crafted input into a website search box, which results in the unauthorized retrieval of customer records from the database. Which of the following vulnerabilities is the attacker most likely exploiting? A, XSS to inject browser-based JavaScript. B, buffer overflow to execute code in the server's memory. C, malicious update to introduce backdoor code into the app. Or D, SQL injection to manipulate backend database queries. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the key phrases here. There are multiple, but I would say the absolute most important one here is websites search box. That key phrase is extremely important to eliminate all the other possible answers, and it gives you the answer right off the bat. But with that said, let's go ahead and do the process of elimination now. We can start by eliminating C, malicious update to introduce backdoor code into the app. The attack here is done through user input, not through software deployment. Next, we can eliminate B, buffer overflow to execute code in the server's memory. Now, buffer overflows usually crash systems, and there's no evidence of that happening here. So now it's between A, XSS, and D, SQL injection. Now remember, the key here is website search box. So we can eliminate A, XSS, which is cross-site scripting. And cross-site scripting runs code in the browser, usually designed, but not always, to steal things like cookies and session tokens. And that leaves us with the answer, which is D, SQL injection to manipulate backend database queries. The attacker is using the search box field to extract customer records, which is a very common attack vector for SQL injections. Question 28. During a security audit, a company identifies the need to enforce acceptable use policies, reduce external bandwidth consumption, and prevent users from directly accessing certain web domains. Which of the following solutions would be most appropriate to implement? A, configure a load balancer to distribute client requests. B, deploy a proxy server to intermediate and filter web traffic. C, implement a jump server to manage secure remote admin sessions. Or D, install an IDS to passively monitor traffic patterns. All right, so let's look at the key phrases here. I'll say there's two. The first one is enforce acceptable use policies. And the second one is prevent users from directly accessing certain web domains. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. We can start by eliminating D, install an IDS to passively monitor traffic patterns. Like before, IDS stands for Intrusion Detection System, and IDS tools can alert on suspicious activity, but they don't block or filter traffic, nor do they reduce bandwidth usage. Next, we can eliminate C, implement a jump server to manage secure remote admin sessions. Now, jump servers are used by admins to securely access systems inside protected environments, but they don't deal with user web access, caching, or filtering. And finally, we can eliminate A, configure a load balancer to distribute client requests. Load balancers, improve availability and performance of internal services by spreading load across multiple servers based on traffic, but they don't enforce web policies or control external access. That leaves us with the answer, which is B, deploy a proxy server to intermediate and filter web traffic. Now, these are ideal for enforcing acceptable use policies, reducing bandwidth, and also blocking access to specific sites. Question 29. A developer is integrating third-party login functionality into a mobile app, allowing users to sign in using their existing social media accounts without sharing their credentials. Which of the following technologies would best support this use case? A. SAML, B. LDAP, C. OAuth, or D. attestation? All right. So there are two different key phrases for this one. The first one is third-party login functionality, and the second is existing social media accounts. So let's go and do the process of elimination now. We'll start with eliminating D, attestation. Now this refers to verifying that a system or user meets certain requirements, often related to device or hardware trust, not really identity, delegation, or third-party login though. Next, we can eliminate B, LDAP. LDAP, that stands for Lightweight Directory Protocol. And LDAP is a directory protocol, often used for internal authentication and querying user data. It doesn't support third-party login. And finally, we can eliminate A, SAML, which stands for Security Assertions and Markup Language. And SAML is commonly used for things like enterprise single sign-on, more so in things like browser-based apps. But it doesn't support third-party login. And that leaves us with the answer, which is C, OAuth. And OAuth is the standard protocol, I would say, used when users grant access to their data without sharing passwords. For example, when logging into an app using your Google or Facebook account. All right, question 30, last question. An employee reports an email that appears to come from the finance department asking for sensitive payroll data. After verifying it as a phishing attempt, which of the following should the security team do next to support organizational education? A, update the endpoint protection signatures to block future attacks. B, add the sender to a block list and delete the message from the mail server. C, use the email in future phishing awareness trainings. Or D, disable the employee's account to prevent further compromise. All right, so kind of a trick question, but the single key phrase here that's important to get this one right is going to be do next to support organizational education. So let's go ahead and do the process of elimination. We can first eliminate A, update the endpoint protection signatures to block future attacks. Now, this is more of a technical security control, and it applies to things like malware or exploit signatures, but it's not always phishing emails. Next, we can eliminate B, add the sender to a block list and delete the message from the mail server. This helps stop that specific threat, but phishing emails often come from spoofs or rotating addresses. Also, deleting the message misses the opportunity to educate users. Finally, we will eliminate D, disable the employee's account to prevent further compromise. There's no evidence the employee clicked a link or was compromised. And disabling their account is premature and not relevant to awareness practices at all. So that just makes this one wrong. And that leaves us with the answer, which is C, use the email in future phishing awareness trainings. Remember, in this scenario in the question, it specifically asks, which of the following should the security team do next to support organizational education? And that is key. Technically, C is the only answer that would make sense given the question requirement. I added this question here because CompTIA will trip you up on a question like this. So it's important to understand what is being asked, even if it seems like the other answers could be the better option. Only C would make sense because the question required supporting organizational education. And that wraps up all the questions for this exam. If you like these types of questions and these videos, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more. And definitely let me know when you pass your exam. I love hearing about people passing. And until next time, like always, see you later and good luck.